The seats are almost all full. Great. As I ring this bowl, relax into this common time and space, realizing that we need to be together. We yearn for connection, the familiar faces of friends, and the sound of shared voices. Welcome, I'm Catherine Brooks, your service leader today. And we have two guests today, many of you know, Reverend Greg Shute, and we have Al Martinez, who's going to play piano for us. Good morning, our friends, members, and now we have some visitors as well. We're really happy to be back in the sanctuary again and to also still have our folks zooming in. And again, as I said, some new visitors. Our mission here at the Unitarian Church of the Chester River is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. We come together in the spirit of inclusion. We welcome all. Just as a quick reminder of our COVID policy when we do this hybrid thing, everybody's wearing their mask, that's great. When we do joys and concerns, now you get to come up to the podium, keep your mask on. You don't have to touch to the microphone, it's all set up for you.
Oh, no, no, I don't want to.
You do not want people to touch the microphone, correct. So it's going to pick up your voice just fine. And I think we're good. So we're going to go ahead and light the chalice.
Join in our chalice lighting. We light this chalice as a symbol of light within all creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be with us always. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts.
Greg's going to give us some opening words.
Good morning. Good morning. It is such a pleasure to be here again this morning. I haven't had an opportunity to do a service in a couple of years now, so I'm so nervous. You know, this critical audience. You know, I have such high expectations. Well, I was trying to think of, you know, what do I want to share with you today? I've shared so many things over the years. And I went back to my Bible, Collected Works of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And so I wanted to start off with just sharing with you a reading from his essay, Nature. Crossing a bare common in snow puddles at twilight under a clouded sky, without having in my thoughts any occurrence of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration. I am glad to be. Within the plantations of the woods of God, a decorum and sanctity reign. A perennial festival is dressed, and the guest sees not how he should tire of them in 1,000 years. In the woods, we return to reason and faith. And there I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part and parcel of God. The name of the nearest friend sounds then foreign and accidental. To be brothers, to be acquaintances, master or servant is then a trifle and only a disturbance. For I am the lover of uncontained and immortal beauty. In the wilderness, I find something more dear and connate than in the presence of others. I am not alone and unacknowledged. It takes me by surprise then, and yet it is not unknown. Its effect is like that of a higher thought or a better emotion coming over me. I'd like to invite us to a few moments of silence for you to consider in your own life those moments of great beauty and exhilaration that come over you in surprising ways, the times when all of a sudden you've felt rather than thought of the unity of all of existence and your presence in its great mystery.
Most of you know Greg Shute, Reverend Greg Shute. He's been a reverend around the country in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Delaware, served many churches in the Delmarva Peninsula. He's been a leader of both youth and in community projects over the years, both in the US, Central America, and Africa. Now he's retired, but he and his wife of 49 years, not 29, 49 years, travel to the East Coast beaches. They love Florence, Italy, and they also go back to South Africa. So we're going to start with Greg.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So my reading from Emerson from Nature sort of hopefully got us thinking along this notion of taking a wider view of the world in which we live and our place in it. In that opening reading, there's one line in there that he was criticized very strongly at the time, where he claims that he is part and parcel of God. In other words, he was claiming he is God. And that's pretty heretical for a lot of the Orthodox perspectives. But that's the essence, I think, of Emerson, and it's the essence of my brand of Unitarianism in particular. He goes on to write another essay called The Oversoul. And so I want to share with you just a brief reading from that to sort of clarify. He writes, "We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meantime, within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object, all are one. We see the world piece by piece as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole of which these are but shining parts is that ultimate soul." Emerson was deeply influenced by Hinduism, and any of you who have followed Hinduism or know anything about it know the concept of Atman and Brahman. Now, Atman is each of us. Each of us is Atman. Each of us is a spirit. Each of us is a singularity. Each of us is an entity. That chair is Atman. Those trees are Atman. The sun and this moon are Atman. Everything that exists is Atman. But the point in Hinduism is that when you sum up all of Atman, you get Brahman. And Brahman is the singularity of all of existence, of all things, so that it begins to lose the individuality and the separateness of pieces in Brahman. And so in this essay, Oversoul, which is absolutely the worst title for anything ever written, I always think of galoshes. But he talks about soul. Each one of us has a soul. Each one of us and everything has a soul. And then the culmination and the summation of all those individual pieces is the oversoul. So he spends a fairly long essay writing about that singularity. And I invite you to read it because for me, that's the essence of Emerson. And a colleague once, we were talking about Emerson one day, and she was brilliant. She said, I can sum up Emerson in one sentence. And I said, go for it. And she said, there is no other. Now think about that for a minute. Think about how we try to identify ourselves, and we try to identify our relationship with the world. Our responsibilities, our joys, our actions, the consequences of our actions. And we continue to perceive the other all around us. And how different it would be if we let go of that and decided not to identify the other, but to see that we are part and parcel all of the same things. And therefore we begin to treat the world in which we live in a different sort of a way. It's a dangerous thought, really, if you think about it. If we really totally immerse ourselves in that, then that means that we act in a different sort of a way. And our sense of relationship becomes different. We don't work on relationships with other people. We don't work on relationships with the world. We don't work on relationships with our perception of the divine, because we begin to see ourselves as all part of a singularity, all wrapped up in one particular unit. That's a hard thought, hard process to move beyond into internalizing it. Especially if you read Emerson. How many of you have ever read Emerson? Really, part of it is the language is so antiquated. It's difficult and the words mean different things. So I found a brilliant new contemporary writer. Polly Behrens wrote a wonderful book called Coming to Life. And she says the same thing, but in modern language. What we imagined as children to be growing up turns out when we get there to be maximum separateness. How often are we reminded that as 2-year-olds, the first thing that we experience that brings us such anger and frustration is recognizing the other. But as feelings of separateness build, desire for oneness increases. But the quest for oneness diverges in two directions, one false and one true. In the false direction, we cope with separateness by trying to establish a variety of supportive interpersonal connections. Isn't that true? This connection-making agenda is our primary occupation and the cause of most of our troubles. For almost all compulsive behavior can be understood in terms of our quest for interpersonal connections of one sort or another. And almost all problems, big and small, can be understood in terms of failing or yearning for something in life. You may recall having talked about the teaching of the Buddha and letting go of attachment. Coming to life may find us at the end of this interpersonal effort. When our interpersonal connections are taut, frayed, constricting, or broken, we are almost willing to consider an alternative perspective. In contrast to the interpersonal connection making approach to separateness is connection seeing or spiritual oneness. Spiritual indicating that the primary issue in achieving this oneness is perceptual rather than physical, strategic, or personal. Conscious spiritual oneness is the ultimate stage of human development and fulfillment. Think about that our ultimate humanity is not identifying ourselves and who we are, but is beginning to understand that we are only one part of something much larger than us. And that the fulfillment of our desires and the completion of our search for self-awareness is not in finding out who we are, but in finding out how we are a part of something much, much larger than us. Now, I started with an opening reading meditation and asked you to consider moments in your life when you got it. They sometimes fall by, in surprising times and places. It's not like you can sit down and think, okay, I'm going to get that moment of enlightenment. But all of a sudden they can sweep over you in a sort of non-verbal, non-mental, non-intellectual sort of a way, but more of a felt experience. I've shared a lot of these with you, I know, over the years, but for me, moments come in surprising kinds of ways. One of the ones I think of most fondly is one of my trips to South Africa and going to God's Golden Acre, which was a children's center that we were involved with for many years. And being there and seeing all the work that they're doing, and 92 children there, not orphan, not people to be adopted, but just that was their home. And this woman, this director Rebecca, coming up to me and asking, as I was getting ready to leave, she was asking me if I would be interested in sponsoring a child there. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, well, this was many years ago when things were pretty tight financially. And I'm thinking, no, I can't do this. And she was saying that for a minimal amount of money, at $300 a year, you can buy the books and a uniform to get the kid to school. And I'm thinking, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. So I said, yes. And I realized that was not an intellectual process, but it was all of a sudden this awareness that, this isn't a choice that I get to make. This is not a rational sort of decision-making process. It's an awareness that I am in an opportunity right now to be in total commitment to the world in which I live. So for a very, very small financial commitment, which, well, we wound up sending her to college, so it got a little more expensive over the years. But all of a sudden, having that moment of knowing that was the right thing to do, it was the right place to be, and it was bigger than myself. And one of the delightful things, of course, was I got home and I had to explain it to my wife. And I said, so actually I had agreed to sponsor a young man named Sizwe. And I said, so I did something while I was gone, and we're committed to $300 a year to get Sizwe in school. And she said, okay, so we should do a girl too. And that was reaffirming too. Now that's kind of a humorous anecdote, but and it might be off topic just a little bit, except that what I'm trying to share with you is when we have those moments of getting it, that are not just theological, not intellectual, not philosophical, but they are deeply spiritual. And that moment made a big difference in our life. She now has a child and lives in Johannesburg, and we made a difference in that life, and that's not a small thing. So what I like to do is, and I always love to do, is have a little conversational time where you get to share with me some of these moments when you may have got a glimpse of Brahman, got a glimpse of the singularity, gotten a felt experience of something bigger than you that has opened you up to that reality and changed your sense of being in the world from one that struggles with interpersonal relationships, struggles with your relationship with the world, and instead allows you to embrace being part and parcel of God. So I know we have to do protocol, so I'd like to walk around and hold this for anyone who would care to speak. Is that okay? Well, good, because I'm going to do it anyways.
Mask or no mask?
Nice to know.
When I was in the hospital last summer with the broken leg and arm, I had a nurse who talked to me a lot, and she had been a traveling COVID nurse. And she told me stories. I'm not even sure I'm going to tell you any of them because they were so bad. But just one little slice was that at one point she had to pile a third body on top of two other ones because they needed the room so bad. And she said to me, I ran into a fire. And that's how she thought of being a COVID nurse. She ran into the fire. And she says, and I'm glad I did, but I'm going to need therapy for the rest of my life.
We do weird things sometimes if we allow ourselves to not think it through rationally, but feel it. And I think it's not just emotionally, I think it's spiritually. And the word spirituality, I think, gets a bad rap because it's hard to explain what that means. But answering yes to Rebecca was a spiritual moment. I think a calling for a nurse can be certainly a spiritual moment where it's not about the job anymore, and it's not even about the individual relationships with people, but it's about this whole calling. Oh, come on, people. Oh, Harry, of course.
I see it just slightly differently. When I was optometrist here, and there was an opportunity came up to go to Central America to hand out glasses and examine eyes. And the feeling is that this is right. It's not so much that it's that I guess whole Brahman thing, that you're part of the whole system and contributing. And that was I've had to this week 9 times. So that gave me the feeling of being incorporated into society better, into the better world.
4 of the 5 kids went at different times, and his mother went one year. And I remember them all.
Felt rewarded.
Well, I think we Unitarians in particular are called to social justice issues. So I think that often is something that resonates with them. I'm reminded of a book I read. I've forgotten the name of the author now, but it was a sociology book published, a doctorate thesis out of Harvard. And it was a man who was talking about the calling to social justice, and he had gone to Guatemala to do social justice work in a small village. And he's recalling the story of a young boy coming up to him and asking him, well, what are you doing here? And he says, I'm helping. And he said, why? And he says, because it makes me feel good to come down here where, you know, you don't have a lot of things that we have and help out. And the young boy said, well, we'll welcome as many of you people as want to come down and we'll let you do this. And it, you know, it was kind of this awareness that this man was having, that a lot of times when we do these things, we think we're doing it for other people, when in reality and I don't mean to dismiss it, but we're doing it for ourselves because we have a call to be this kind of person and do these kinds of things. So it's one of those opportunities where, you know, if instead of saying no, we say yes more often. I heard, is time up?
Nope, nope,
Oh.
I have one. I got my mic.
Okay.
I grew up in Kansas. 5 of us kids in Kansas. My dad was a plastic surgeon, but he was not a typical plastic surgeon in what you think of with plastic surgery. And when I was 11, my parents decided to broaden our perspectives beyond Kansas. They took us to India. So here are my parents in their mid-40s, and I think of myself in my mid-40s, it's like, I don't think so. They took 4 of us kids to India, and that experience changed my life. It's hard to articulate it, but one of the 5 of us did not go. So that was kind of interesting. It was a rebellious sister who said, no way, I'm in college. And one sister in college and the 3 of us in high school and middle school went. And there was never a lot of explanation by my parents, excuse me, why they did that. But as I said, we came back to this country and we went back to Kansas and we only stayed a year. My dad said, Kansas doing plastic surgery is not for me or my kids. So he took the 3 of us, the younger 3, to Peru. And we did that for a year. And the 3 of us kids were in Spanish-speaking Catholic schools, which was pretty traumatic. They didn't speak the language and there was serious Catholicism going on. By the way, girls' schools and boys' schools, so you're segregated in addition. And that did a lot for me as far as being in a country where you don't speak the language. I think it was a spiritual experience. I never thought of it that way. And I never thought about my parents as being spiritual and guiding us and having a higher power that was guiding them. But as I become more adult, I realized that is an important thing, that we don't realize, even growing up, how these things happen in our lives, but how important they can be in our perspectives. All of us kids ended up doing community service kinds of things. And that kind of surprises me that here we were, doctors' children, and fairly affluent in many ways, but that's what we ended up doing. And I think it has to go back to my parents and them putting us in an environment where really intuitively we experienced that, not verbally. They didn't explain it to us. They didn't say, this is why we're doing that. It was just putting us kids in that kind of an environment. And I think that's where those things happen on a real sort of visceral level.
You're going to disagree with me, Carl, I know.
No, I agree with you, Greg. This relates more to your first reading. Where I feel oneness is in nature so much. And I've felt it various times. But for me, being in an old growth forest with huge trees, being in nature's cathedral is awe-inspiring, and I do feel the oneness in those situations.
Well, and Emerson, of course, that essay is Nature is the name of it. And I think a lot of times you do that. And if you read Thoreau, that's what he does and everything. So the challenge is, can we find it in the hectic life of community? That's a good question. Many of you also know, dashboard of my car, a little Buddha. So when I'm stuck in traffic, instead of cussing and honking, I look at the Buddha and think, okay, be in the moment, be in the moment. So yes, it's wonderful to take, yeah, I was noticing all these trees that were planted out here, they're giant, yeah.
Memorial Woodland.
Yeah.
Being there.
Yeah.
Experience oneness.
And that's a nice place too, because it's community, it's representative of the community, and so you can be there and sort of meditate and feel the presence. Thanks. Your hand was up first. We get both.
Oh, I get the feeling in very simple ways. I get answers that come into my head from questions I'm thinking about. One really little one is, well, I talk to my plants and flowers, and some being in my house. And in the morning, I might tell them they're beautiful and how pretty they look and thank them. And they told me back that I didn't have to verbalize that.
Well, yeah, that's sort of the point. It's not a verbal communication. There's something more deeper than that.
A lot of things come to mind, but the one thing that I was thinking of when I felt of oneness, and I'm supposed to be here, was at the Women's March after the Trump inauguration on January 21st, 2017. And I was among over 1 million people on the mall, and we were all as one, and there was harmony, and there were young people and old people and people of all races, and we're all wearing mostly our pink pussy hats. And I just felt like after all that angst and the disappointment of that election, that I was not alone, that there were others who were thinking the same thing I was thinking. I took my daughter and her friend too, so I wanted to mention that.
My 30-year-old daughter and I regularly stay in contact when we have episodes of what we call the weave. And what we're describing to each other on some of those phone calls, she lives in Massachusetts, are basically episodes of synchronicity or coincidence that seem far too powerful to just be random chance. And if any, there are no God figures in my life, but I have this great respect for the interconnectedness, the cosmic soup. And it seems not only to allow these coincidences to happen, but to somehow choreograph them, and meaningfully so, so that there seems to be this kind of not only intelligence, but compassion. And after thinking about it for very long, it seems to me, at least, that there is some kind of universal engineer that somehow, and I kind of rationalize it as there's a basic law of less friction makes things easier. And the universe is looking for ways to make all of this, not just here on Earth, but all of it subject to less friction, and brings these moments where you're sent these messages, and the messages are so compelling and convincing.
Well, so the trick becomes, how can we foster those moments?
We trust them.
I think, well, yeah, be aware of them and trust them and completely enjoy them and allow them to sweep over you when they come. But are there ways to actually, do meditation or, walk in the woods, have a discipline of some kind, whatever. Anybody online want to comment, or can we do that, or? They don't have anything to say. Okay. All right. Well, I have to ask Kevin. Say something, Kevin. You're such a brilliant boss.
It's really great to have you here. It really is. I've had a lot of moments, and my earliest moments of the feeling of oneness was when I was 4 and 5 years old. I think I may have mentioned this some other time. I would be out in the side yard underneath the bushes. All by myself, I would go out there every afternoon in the good weather. And just by myself, and I would crouch down and I would pick up the earth and have these little landslides. I wiggle my finger, go wee, wee, wee. And the little birds were around me. They were used to me. They would come close and all that. So, and I felt like a oneness, and I've never forgotten the power of that. And then I went to grammar school and I lost it for a while. Later on, I cut it back. But anyway, I could go on with it. But that was a very, very early experience of feeling in a visceral way the connectedness with all the things at the sun, glancing off of the leaves. One side of the leaves was shiny, the other not shiny, and all those different things together, and the ants and all of that. It was incredible.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's the ultimate. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Deborah would like to share.
And then we go to school and we're taught that otherness, which is what she's writing about, Polly Behrens is writing about, where we have to distinguish and we have to begin to work on interpersonal relationships. So we see this other person, and so that how do we deal with that other person instead of being the other person too, with the answer. And psychologists talk about transpersonal. Instead of trying to work on interpersonal relationships, talk about transpersonal, which is a larger relationship, which encompasses me and you and her and him and everything else. It's bigger than interpersonal, but it's a challenge because we're not taught to do that.
This makes me think on a very basic level, and I think we've all experienced this, like you talk about the trans between even two people. How many of us have been with sick friends, sick children, or whatever it is, and not for a minute do you think of yourself, that whole sense of self leaves and you're just in this open, receptive, loving place, which doesn't have to be with the whole world, maybe it can be, but at that moment, there is no you, it's just this flow between you. When our kids are sick or, and even so mundane as, dare I say, with the Olympics, when somebody has a fall or something, your heart just goes to them like you're one with them, or they win or something. You're so thrilled. You're not thinking of yourself for a second, but it's the shared common experience, the human piece of it.
Well, as my brilliant colleague said, there is no other.
We have one.
I don't know who does that.
Just point to John. Want to acknowledge Deborah on Zoom?
Yes. Yes.
You
Deborah?
asked if we could manufacture the space where we could get there. And I think that we do have a lot of effect upon that we can back away from the minutia of life to take a look at the bigger picture. I find that looking at water does it for me, which is probably why I'm a sailor and because I'm a sailor. And I find that on the deck of a boat, when everything is working together, that my mind can look at the larger thing and wonder how that works, how it happens that sometimes in life, there's a point when you can see everything and then, you walk away and you do something stupid and it's all gone, but you had it for a moment.
I'm done.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Al. As most of you know, when we have these kinds of services, we do still have an offering basket out in the hall. And for those of you that are Zooming, you can contribute by hitting the donate button on our website. So we've gone technological and also sort of real world here. So Jane did a nice job reminding us of the Great Valentine's Day cookie giveaway. For those of you here, it's in the lobby. For those of you not here today, you can drive by in the parking lot And we will give you a bag of cookies between 1 and 3 this afternoon. So everybody can get cookies, and we will try not to steal them, those of us that helped. So another announcement we have is that the pledge drive from the Stewardship Committee is well on its way in a lot of ways. You hopefully got a reminder, a little card in the mail, and the Pony Express is delivering through the mail your whole pledge package. And in that will be a letter from us, the budget, upcoming budget that's happening, and your pledge form itself, and then a self-addressed stamped envelope. Make it really easy for you. And then next week, Reverend Sue will do a formal kickoff, try to motivate us around supporting our church. And then after that service next week, Jim is going to do a review of the budget and answer questions here, but also on Zoom. And additionally, Jim is doing a YouTube so that people want to go online and look at it at a more slow pace. That will be happening. Have another little special announcement, and that this week is Reverend Greg's birthday coming up. Does it actually fall on Valentine's Day?
No,
Oh,
Tuesday.
Tuesdays, okay, close enough.
I'll be 35 again.
All right, thank God, we were worried about that. Okay, and we also had a request from Diane Shields on the greeters. We have someone in the lobby now that we're back to live. We need someone to help, or several people, to help greet people that are new and welcome them to our church. So if anyone's interested, please contact Diane Shields. And is there also a sign up there? Yeah, also a sign up there in the lobby. Any other announcements that anybody needs to make, would like to make? Okay. So Greg, you have some closing words for us?
Of course. These are more words from Polly Behrens. Sooner or later, hurt, frustrated, exhausted by all attempts to achieve wholeness and completeness, we are forced to consider a radically different idea: wholeness as oneness. Like waves, leaves, sunbeams, and islands, everything, including ourselves, can be viewed in two ways. Superficially, they appear complete and separate things, but there is a deep, invisible oneness between each and its underlying source. Island with earth, leaf with tree, light ray with sun. Each individual expresses the universe in its own unique way. And that relationship to each other is beautifully determined by the underlying reality from which each emanates. The same is true of us. Therefore, our quest for wholeness takes place neither through self-completion or self-interest, but through discovering what it is with which we are one, and then begin to become one with it. So may it be.
There's got to be a way to extinguish the chalice down here. Just blow them out. Okay, that means I have to take my mask off.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
So see you next week, folks.